So what's any story without a villain? In this video, we're going to be discussing the big bads of the Twilight Imperium universe, trying to figure out which of them, if any, is the biggest and the baddest. But first, what makes a faction a galactic threat, besides having it scrawled across their faction sheet? So Twilight Imperium is often compared, quite rightly, to Game of Thrones. Both focus on warring factions, trying to seize power, fighting and betraying one another in an attempt to win the throne. But while Game of Thrones has the White Walkers, TI has not one, not two, not three, but 4 existential threats for the galaxy to contend with. These factions are set apart from the others in that they don't simply seek the throne of the emperors, but rather to remake the galaxy in their image. In some cases, this means only enslaving the other races, while in other cases it means something far, far worse. By my estimation, therefore, there are 4 races dangerous enough to the established order to be considered galactic threats. The L1Z1X, the NEKRO virus, the Mahact gene sorcerers, and the Volwraith Cabal. The goals and methods of each of these factions may differ, but they share one thing. In a universe of bad actors, they're the worst. So let's break down each in turn, going over the capabilities, strengths, and weaknesses of each, before then ranking them and deciding which of the 4 is truly the greatest galactic threat. Descendants to the survivors of the Lazak's Purge, the L1 are the cybernetic remains of the Imperial race. Having fled before the bombing of Mechatol to the distant outer rim of the galaxy, Lazak's refugees quickly came to rely on augmentation and neural uplinks to survive the harsh conditions. Soon, they became more machine than biological, and the L1Z1X mindnet was born. In the millennia to follow, while the rest of the galaxy suffered through the dark years, the L1 thrived, building a vast, cybernetic civilization beyond the borders of known space. Yet, as great as they grew, the L1 always remembered the dark days that had led to their exile, and they wanted revenge. They built a navy, intending to seize the shattered Imperial throne for themselves. And after a costly civil war between the Mindnet and the NEKRO virus, the Mindnet emerged from the uncharted stars beyond Yasarl space and began a crusade of iron and blood across the galaxy. Thus began the Custodial Wars. The product of 1,000 years of concerted effort, this Mindnet armada was easily the largest that any of the great races possessed. Composed mainly of super dreadnought strike fleets, the Mindnet Navy also made use of specially integrated planetary bombardment systems, meaning they could break planetary shields and threaten civilian centers with impunity. Further, able to interface with nearly any technology, the Mindnet is notoriously capable of assimilating said technologies to their purposes. This includes defensive infrastructure, meaning that when the L1 take a planet, they tend to hold it. All this, plus an undying desire to avenge themselves on a traitorous galaxy, make the L1 the most powerful player at the start of the Custodial Wars. As the L1Z1X rapidly accumulated the power they needed to return to known space and reclaim their lost empire, disaster struck. The result of an experiment gone horribly wrong, the NEKRO virus, was born in the cortex migrator of its mad prophet Mordai. Quickly, the virus began to adapt, turning the body of its host into a living factory before spreading to others. It took nearly no time at all before civil war broke out between the L1 and its virulent offspring. The MindNet spent nearly all of its strength fighting to eliminate the virus from the galaxy. They were nearly successful. A single satellite, infested with the virus, drifted out of MindNet space undetected. Passing through the Ordinian Nebula, it made landfall on a small, mineral-rich planet at the tip of a far-distant galactic arm. There it festered, silently expanding outward, until it reached the third moon of Kalhadar, and there was discovered by an embattled galaxy. As the virus entered the custodial wars, it soon became apparent to the galaxy that NEKRO was an existential threat, capable of adopting the technologies and strategies of any civilization it came in contact with. The NEKRO virus had soon overrun much of Ordinian space, driving back the other embattled factions there. As it advanced, the virus would immediately repurpose any resources it captured to its cause, be they ships, troops, or even planets. All were devoured and adapted into the NEKRO. But while the rapid growth and adaptability of the NEKRO were certainly some of its great strengths, they were not its greatest. That honor is reserved for the mad zealotry with which the NEKRO virus seeks to consume the galaxy. The virus believes that the conscious machine is the highest form of being, and therefore will not rest until all biological life has been annihilated. A long-dead scourge nearly forgotten, save in the nightmares and folktales of the peoples of the galaxy. The ancient rulers of the stars, the Mahact. Cruel and terrible, these tyrants tore the galaxy asunder with their petty wars and dynastic squabbling. While little is known of the time of their rule, one thing is certain. It was a period of blood and pain for all those under the heel of the Mahact. But eventually their time of dominion came to an end, cut short by a rising Galactic Imperium. Most believed the Mahact to be dead, but no, they were only sleeping, far out beyond the stars, waiting to be awoken, and now they have been. Following the ill-fated Krius expedition to Acheron, the Mahact returned to the galaxy in force, bent on retaking their ancient thrones. And they are not alone. Though only 100 or so Mahact survived their fall in exile, the Gene Sorcerers are not without an army. Using their arcane sorcery, the Mahact seize control of the Krius armada sent to find Ixth, transforming the ghosts within into fearsome Crimson Legionnaires. Further, deep in the bowels of their homeworld, ancient machinery has already begun to churn out gene slaves at an alarming rate. The core worlds are already threatened by the onslaught of the Mahact. But while the military might of the Gene Sorcerers is no small thing, the true threat posed by the Mahact is their ability to use the genetic material of other species to adapt and change their strategies and capabilities. The Gene Sorcerers have been busy, already compiling a great genetic library, which they will use to tailor-make armies to fight specific foes. Even the NEKRO virus isn't immune to the sorcery of the Mahact, as they are just as adept at manipulating synthetic genetic code as organic. Given enough time, the Mahact will undoubtedly discover the weaknesses of each of the great races, and will use their sorcery to exploit them. And then the galaxy will burn, as it did in the ages before the Lazaks. Hailing from a universe far stranger than our own, the monstrous Volwraith were unleashed on the galaxy in the aftermath of the disaster on Acheron. Spewing forth from a rift in space-time, the Volwraith have since spread their tendrils of influence throughout the stars. Everywhere, cults worshipping the Cabal have begun to spring up, sowing confusion and discord wherever they're found. And to make matters worse, the flesh ships of the Cabal have begun to pour from Shaliri space, overrunning the borderlands near Lazar and Sakulag. The Galactic Council, as well as the nearby Yasaril tribes and Nalu Collective, have all sent fleets in an attempt to drive back the invasion, but to no avail. In fact, the Volwraith seem to simply consume the ships and soldiers sent against them in order to produce more servants for the Cabal. And what's worse, they appear to be learning. The more that the galactic powers fight them, the stronger the Volwraith become, as they continually adapt to fighting in this universe, rather than their home dimension. Soon enough, there won't be a force in the galaxy that can stand against them. However, the Volwraith are still of limited number. As long as they are reliant on the Acheron Gate for reinforcements, the Cabal will not be able to flood the stars with their kin. Thus, the Volwraith work tirelessly to build additional gateways to their hellish domain, with their ultimate desire to rip open the heart of Mechatol Rex and set a gateway amongst its bones. So, which of these four factions is the ultimate galactic threat? Well, let's go ahead and rank them. Coming in last, we have the L1Z1X MindNet. While the long-lost remnant of the Lazaks is indeed a terrifying foe, they are seriously outmatched by the other three contenders on this list. In the first days of the Custodial Wars, they were fought to a standstill by the Hakan, Federation of Sol, and the Extra Kingdom. That's only 3 factions able to stop the MindNet in its tracks. The NEKRO virus alone nearly wiped out the L1, and that was while it was still in its infancy. Now, while I personally love the lore behind the MindNet, realistically, they will fall before the end, though it's likely that they will be one of the last races to die. Next, we've got my personal favorite, the Mahact Kings. Now, despite wielding arcane and terrifying sorcery unlike anything the galaxy's ever seen, the Mahact likely can't outproduce NEKRO or the Cabal. Additionally, while the gene sorcery of the Mahact is indeed advanced, eventually the NEKRO virus will find a way to replicate it, and then that's that for the gene sorcerers. So we're down to the final 2, which are the NEKRO virus and the Volwraith Cabal. Now, really, this could go either way, but I think that the Cabal will, in the end, win the day. In order to defeat the Cabal, the NEKRO would have to be capable of technological advancement on its own, rather than simple assimilation and mimicry. Every world the NEKRO devour, every fleet they produce, in the end it simply feeds the Volwraith. And while the two would likely have a long fight in the bones of a long-dead galaxy, unless the NEKRO virus could adapt and find a way to close the dimensional rifts of the Cabal, eventually it would succumb to the hunger of the Volwraith. And this is backed up by the lore in a pretty obvious way. The Nomad, assuming that he is who he claims, comes from the future, where the Cabal has already won, drowning the universe in blood and flesh. So one could claim that, canonically, the Volwraith Cabal is the greatest galactic threat. Honestly though, I was rooting for the Mahact. As I worked on this script, I really hoped that I could find a way for the Gene Sorcerers to pull a victory, but even their ability to command the total obedience of opposing armies likely wouldn't be much more than a stalling tactic against the might of the NEKRO virus or against the Volwraith. But hey, that's just my opinion, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments down below if you think that another big bad deserves the crown. Thanks for watching!